This is OUTrageIOUSity 4. OUTrageIOUSity 4 is about colleges completely missing education and educating. Students applying to job training organizations called colleges that completely lack education. There are a great many colleges, perhaps almost all of the American colleges, none of whose faculty know what education is at all. They're trainers, they are information shovelers, they're instructors, but they are not educators. They don't know what education is. They've never seen it. They themselves went to college to get a job, make money. There's a lot of teaching, there's a lot of learning, and no educated. Now we have the internet, we have these massive 100,000 person courses. You can forget the 100,000 person courses. The 100,000 person courses are all about faculty trying to make money and nothing about education. Not even anything about teaching or learning. It turns out that Stanford, Harvard, and MIT faculty are very, very bad teachers. At the best, they're average teachers. And the only advantage is that at Harvard, MIT, or Stanford, if they've done good research recently, you can hear it quicker from their mouth each week as they do it than you can waiting 3 months for some article to come out, or a year and a half for some commercial journal to charge you $30 to read their article in a journal, or 2 years for it to come out in a book. But we now have most, if not all, almost all of our colleges with no educating at all. And the result is civilizational decline and disaster. Elites that lead us into wars that grow corporate profits for businesses and ruin the nation's finances. All of the elites from Harvard and MIT going to Wall Street to make money for themselves, to pay for cocaine addictions for their kids, and doing nothing to help the nation, not even intending to help the nation. Nuclear engineering degree, go to Wall Street. Harvard Kennedy School, go to Wall Street. It's amazing. When the elites are disgusting people, the future of the nation is not wonderful. And, you know, there's a kind of honesty to poverty. You look at China, and God, they've got problems. This 3,000-year-old dictatorship, their way of ruling in families and on a micro, meso, and overall level. But they really want to develop. And whatever system they've got, every piece of that system wants to develop. And if some unfairness, some political risk occurs, they're going to fix that in order to keep the growth going. And they're not going to be satisfied until they're 18 times bigger than the United States, and it's not going to be a problem for them. They got the brains, they got the drive, they've got the biggest problem they have in terms of Grondana's theory of development, culture of development, is an unreliable near future, and they need to have a reliable near future. And so they've really got to get a little bit more laws in place and a little bit less whim of the leaders in place. And that's going to hold them back, slow them down, if they're not careful. But the other components of Grondana's theory are all there and working very, very well. And it's going to be great to see the Americans humiliated by that stuff and to realize that this self-indulgent, lazy Wall Street elites that Harvard and MIT have been generating have been a disease on the American character. And that poor Silicon Valley, 8 times more contribution to GDP than a Harvard and MIT, and then the Harvard and MIT every 20 years lose it, throw it all away, $13 trillion gone. We haven't paid for it yet. It's on the debt of the United States government, gone, lost by Harvard and MIT elites on Wall Street. Everything that Silicon Valley made for 10 years, thrown away by Harvard and MIT. Silicon Valley makes it, Harvard and MIT throw it in the trash. So that's the problem. Now, this is about colleges without education. And now, not even with much learning, because the internet is much better for learning and teaching than colleges are. I mean, enormously better. I am interested in a topic, and I'll do the Wikipedia article with the direct links, and then I'll get some YouTube videos on particular ideas that I have a hard time with. And boom, within an hour, I've got 3, 4, 8 weeks of Stanford University courses without the money, without this bullshit from the inadequate professor who's a researcher and not a good teacher, and without the elite arrogance that where the professor tries to make this look complicated and hard in order to make him look important. So, boy, there's no competition there at all. No question that the web is going to wipe out all these colleges and these these researchers pretending to be professors who don't even try to educate because none of them know what education is. They don't even intend to educate. They went to college to make money, and then they raised kids to make money in the college. Now, what is education? What's an educated person? Don't ask me, Richard Green. Don't ask me. I don't know. I don't have a clue. Here I was, my first academic job at the University of Chicago Business School, standing in front of 150 MBAs. I was supposed to educate them. What is that? And I didn't have a clue. I bought 200 books and read what, Rousseau and Alfred North Whitehead and Hans Georg Gadamer and Hans Georg Go to Heller and Thomas Luhmann. These German guys whose books is 80% self-citations where they cite their own previous work. Some kind of mental disease that occurs mostly in German universities. So I read all that crap, and basically everybody said that educated people are people like me. Rousseau said people are like Rousseau, and John Dewey said that educated people are like Americans, like him. And Alfred North Whitehead said educated people are very flowy and progressive, like him. It's just a bunch of male, narcissistic, self-praising crap. So I said, okay, those 200 people are idiots. They certainly don't know what educatedness is. So where do you find it? So I was going to ask the best people in the world, and I find out who they are, all of them, find out who all the best people in the world are, and sample them in a stratified sample, 63 different professions from 41 nations, and ask these 8,000 people, who's best in your field, how did they get to be best? And that would define for me excellent sciences. Turned out when we analyzed the data that there were 54 different ways to be excellent in physics. The same 54 ways were the ways to be excellent in business. The same 54 ways were ways to be an excellent lawyer. The same 54 ways were ways to be an excellent geographer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those were called the excellent sciences. Now, a lot of them work novelty sciences, how to bring the new into the world, like invention, discovery, creativity, et cetera, innovation. But a bunch of them were things like educatedness and effectiveness. Turned out that one of the ways to be the top anything was by being the most highly educated person in law, the most highly educated person in geography, the most highly educated dancer, the most highly educated musician, the most highly educated philosopher. And so I had my sample of people, eminent people, nominate people who had risen to the top of your 63 fields by virtue of each of those 54. So we ended up with 154 people who rose to the top by being highly educated, 150 people who rose to the top by being highly effective, 100 people who rose by being very creative, 150 people who rose by managing complexity well, 150 who reached the top by managing error well, and these other 54 excellent sciences. But one of them was 150 people who rose to the top by being highly educated. And then I did interviews and questionnaires of them, a very elaborate 40-page thing, to find out what their actual capabilities were that distinguished them from uneducated people in their field. And there are a lot of ways to do that, by asking them about how they had been earlier in their career and compared to how they were now, what they saw now as weaknesses in the new people in the field coming up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are various clever ways to do it. I've written books and articles on it, so you could go read those. But basically, we found 64 capabilities of highly educated people. Now that amazed me, because about 40 of those 64 capabilities I couldn't understand. I mean, the data defined them, and I could read the data again and again, but I didn't have them. I didn't identify with them. They weren't in me. And the great colleges I had gone to had somehow managed to miss 40 of them. So if highly educated people are that, MIT doesn't do that to you. And Wellesley doesn't do that to you. And University of Michigan doesn't do that to you. And University of Chicago doesn't do that to you. So they were news to me. And so I started a 10-year journey of not only teaching those capabilities to students, but learning myself what they were, because they were from people much more eminent than me, and these guys had capabilities I didn't have. And I didn't even know what they were. I'd never thought those thoughts before. And so, you can look at the list yourself. It's all over the web, scribe.com, my book's there, etc. And one of them's called Are You Educated? 64 Capabilities of Highly Educated People. Another one is called Are You Educated Japan? 300 Capabilities from 5 Models of Educatedness. So you can look them all up there. But basically, that's my definition of educated. In other words, I redid Plato. Plato tried to define the good philosophically. And there are other people who try to find the good religiously, and other people try to find it politically. And I thought all those people are idiots. Actually, I use a harsher word. Anal opening type people, if you know what I mean. Those are disgusting. They don't intend to be right. They don't intend to be honest. They don't intend to help the world. And they are in some sort of an ego thing of wanting how they were born to somehow magically happen to be better than everybody else's how they were born. A hopeless, stupid idea if there ever was one. I was born in America, so it's the best country. And that's proof that someone's a moron. I was born in Japan, so it's obviously the best country. A proof that they're a moron. I was born in Russia, so it's obviously the best country. That proof that they're a moron. I was born in this kind of family. Obviously, that's the best family. A moron. I went to this college, therefore it's the world's best college. That's a moron. So, if you just take praise of yourself where you happen to grow up as proof that it's best in the world, you are really stupid and dangerous. So I'm not that dumb, so I didn't do that stuff. I figured that I was probably born in a pretty crummy place and in a pretty crummy family, and the colleges I went to were not so hot, even though they were very elite and famous, but they weren't hot when I went there. And there was a tremendous amount of deadwood. In fact, the dumbest professor I had at MIT is still there. All the good ones have left, been hired by other universities, and he's still there 40 years later. I can't get rid of him. He's really, you'd call it academic harassment now. He's just incompetent. The joke here is that educatedness can be defined empirically. Not philosophically, not religiously, not politically, but empirically with data from who our best people are. Now, I don't know if that's great or right or wrong. I just don't know any better way to define educatedness than looking at people in 63 professions and 41 nations who rose to the top of all that different stuff on the basis of being more highly educated physicists, lawyers, businessmen, philosophers, teachers, nurses, social workers than others, and asking them what capabilities distinguish them from average people in their field. And that defined for me educatedness. I've got books on it. You can read it. And you can go to all of our best colleges for 4 years, major in anything you want there, and learn none of those 64 capabilities. That's the departedness, the departure between colleges and education in our time. Most of the professors, maybe all of the professors in most universities and colleges are uneducated. And there's a test for it. It's in my book, so you'll have to look it up yourself. I'm not going to tell it to you now. It's a lovely little short test on it. It takes, 10 minutes to do. But you can test everybody in your life to find out if they're educated or not in just a 10-minute little conversational interaction with it. And almost everybody fails. There are very, very few educated people in the world today. And that's a great deal of reason why we have the troubles we have. An educated person, one of the 64 capabilities is called leaving home. And it means that an educated person, e-juko, led out from their initial factory settings as a person. A male person who acts malely is not educated. An born American who acts American is not educated. A Harvard grad who acts like a Harvard grad is not educated. People who do not escape their initial factory settings of gender, error, profession, family, nation, all of that, are barbaric and quite dangerous. And by that criteria, the leaders of the United States are extremely dangerous people to hang around and be with. Now, we need colleges, and we need to educate people. And we need to invite people to become adults, which is a 30-year journey. You start at age 20 and you end up an adult at 50. And by replacing the routines that are your initial factory settings consciously with better routines, and it takes 30 years to practice those millions of new routines to replace the millions of old routines you got as a kid as your initial factory settings, so you end up an adult at 50. What is an adult? An adult is somebody who's where and when they were raised. If you know that, tells you nothing about what they think and act and what their views are now. They've replaced their initial factory setting stuff with consciously chosen better routines from the best in history and the best in the contemporary world. They're self-made by age 50 or 55. You don't find any 30-year-old adults. You don't find any 35-year-old adults. You don't find any 45-year-old adults. I've never run into anybody remotely like that. You run in, the first ones you run into are about 50, 55 years old. And they're very few. I mean, you're talking about 1 in 100,000. You're not talking about 1 in 1,000. Very, very rare people. But boy, they are attractive. And they change. They are like life-changing in every little daily encounter I have with them. You just want to, pay airfare, get a hotel, and hang around them for a few weeks. Because every moment you're around them opens doors for you and makes you see things that you miss and feel things that you've never felt and notice things you've never noticed. But these guys escaped so much of what I haven't escaped yet. And they show me, gee, at my age, there are all these other doors still there to be open.